o eSport, aunque sea sin querer. No me
Sí,
cuenten.
seguro.
Que no me
Seguro.
cuenten. Yo nunca, ni lo haré. No me cuentes milonguitas, chaval. Yo la verdad es que Loki Play seguro que tampoco ha visto eSports jamás. Jamás. Yo ya no los veo. Eso es otra historia.
Hacer un rey de la pista en el Pro 8 y que tú pierdas y veas a tus colegas jugar es ver un eSport, ¿eh?
Es una pregunta. Eso es una pregunta de esas de por la noche, de estar de fiesta hasta altas horas y preguntarte, esto tal, no sé qué, no sé cuánto. Sí, sí, sí. A ver, tenemos musiquita. A ver si empezamos ya. Está oscureciéndose todo.
Hay un
Así
señor que
que,
pasa por medio, no sé qué hace.
pues un señor que está ahí con sus cosas pasando por medio. Ya ha sido la presentación.
Está pasando
No,
una bandeja.
no,
Míralo.
todavía no. Si hay alguien que nos esté viendo desde los élites, desde aquí, todo nuestro cariño y amor a los élites. Creo que empieza ya, creo que ahora sí que empieza. Ah, pues no.
El Kojima de la primera fila es...
¿Pero el chino ha puesto bien la cámara o no?
Creo que sí, creo que sí.
¡Oh!
Ahora sí, ahora sí.
Ahora.
Vale, lo traduzco. 1963 lo entendemos todos, ¿no? Silencio, silencio, silencio. Empezamos.
We were making a lot of decisions where we thought things were going to be because we didn't have the compute power to support at the time what we wanted to do.
So at lunch one day, a Bell Labs executive asked, what would it take to ray trace this scene in real time? And I said, well, we need a 512 by 512 array of Cray supercomputers, each with a red, green, and blue light bulb on top, and we'll put it in the desert and fly over it at 10,000 feet and take pictures of it.
I recall it being sort of 10 or 12 months of hell getting these shots done, and it was because the render times were so horrendously long.
Fight one, ready, go!
Una de aplausos. ¿Se escucha flojo? No sé si vosotros...
Yo lo he escuchado bien.
Vale, ok.
Founder and CEO, Jensen Huang.
Viene el CEO Jensen Huang. A ver qué nos cuenta.
Oye, un par de detalles antes de que empiecen por aquí. Crisis se veía en 2006 como una verdadera locura y con
Y
el juego de
ahora
Doom
es una locura.
y con el juego de Doom podemos ver todo el cambio de gráficos desde los principios de las generaciones.
Pues sí, pues sí, pues sí. A ver qué nos cuenta.
Don't panic, everything's gonna be fine.
No
There
paniques,
is
que todo
so
va a
much
estar bien.
technology in this room right now.
Demasiada tecnología en esta habitación ahora mismo.
under control.
Está
Okay, so you
muy,
guys are gonna
muy
have a
fuera de
great show.
control.
Welcome to the launch of the GeForce GTX
Atención.
1180.
Bienvenidos al lanzamiento de GeForce GTX y 2080. Y se queda así en silencio. Yo no he dicho nada.
I have never seen anything that leaked this much.
11, perdón. 11. He dicho 20.
The good news is you're going to be surprised. We didn't do it on purpose,
Uy, perdón.
but everything on the web, every spec is wrong. You're going to be
No hay más,
surprised.
no hay,
It's
para que
gonna
se lo
be a
pregunten, no
great
hay más
show.
volumen, ¿eh?
This is a historic moment. This is a historic moment for computer graphics. For as long as there has been computer graphics, it has been the dream of computer scientists to generate with computers photorealistic images. When you look at this, what we consider the holy grail of computer graphics, you see some effects that today are simply impossible to create. First of all, light is coming in from the window.
Habla de la luz
It's
que viene
bouncing
de
all
por la
over this
habitación, que hay
room.
entre la habitación.
The vast majority of this room is being illuminated indirectly. Whenever light touches a material, strikes a material, that material is rendered and simulated physically. The material is metallic or dielectric, is either smooth or rough. The roughness can come from microsurface structures that bounces light, absorbs light, diffuses light in a very different way. Maybe it's orientation dependent, maybe it's not. Some of it is glossy, some of it is matte, and as a result, this entire room looks alive.
Dice que todo lo que entra de
As
luz y
light is
demás
bouncing around this
está
entire
renderizado
room, it
de
doesn't
forma
strike every
que
surface the same way.
va
Some
de
of
una
it
forma u otra
is
según donde
occluded
golpee, la
from light.
distancia,
We
etcétera.
call it ambient occlusion. You also see that there's a desk lamp, and it's shining through the glass, and because the glass has curvature and shape, light refracts around it and accumulates in a way that we call caustics.
Como el cristal es curvo y demás, la luz que entra pues funciona de forma diferente a como lo refleje y demás.
The shadow of phasma coming from all different directions. It's called umbra and penumbra. Umbra is where the shadow is completely occluded, and penumbra is where it's partially occluded, and so you see the sense of soft shadows. She's reflected in the mirror, even the parts that you don't see. You know how mirrors work. You could see behind things. Oftentimes in video games, we can't do that. The little bit of shadow behind that painting, ambient occlusion.
Está hablando un poquito de cómo todos los elementos que podemos ver tienen su propia sombras, luces y demás, según cómo es la figura y demás.
And refracts it back out, called subsurface scattering. All of those little tiny effects are really, really hard to do. And the good news is, in 1979, a computer scientist named Turner Whitted, now a researcher at Nvidia, described an algorithm that was both powerful and elegant. He called it multi-bounce recursive ray tracing. By starting from your eye instead of from a light source where light is emitted, because the vast majority of the light doesn't reach your eyes, so there's no reason to trace them. He traced light backwards, inverse ray tracing, through the eye, through the pixel, through every single pixel on the screen. The ray would seek out, would be sent forward, and if it were to strike a triangle, it would then send off a shadow ray to decide whether it's in shadow. That shadow ray would go towards the light sources.
Como dicen por ahí, es simulación de rayos de luz. Eso es el ray tracing y cómo le da todo el aspecto de intenta darle la mayor realidad posible.
Then it would accumulate the color and the intensity of that light would then be used to shade that surface. If that beam of light, if that ray going through another pixel were to strike a reflective surface, it would generate shadow rays to see if it's in shadow.
El único juego que hemos visto con ray tracing es Metro Exodus.
A reflected ray, a reflection ray. That reflection ray would be basically the same incident angle relative to the normal of that surface where it struck. And then it would go off and decide whether it strikes another triangle. And if it were to strike another triangle, it would create shadow rays. It would determine whether that particular surface was in shadow or reflection rays and such. And if it was to hit into a surface that is translucent, then it would generate refraction rays based upon Snell's law. And that this algorithm, this basic algorithm, would recursively run. And eventually, he would generate this beautiful image. In 1979, he
El
generated
algoritmo
this
se
image.
irá trabajando y dándole
And it
vueltas
took
para crear una imagen
1.5
hermosa.
hours on a $1 million VAX computer. Basically, he was generating 60 pixels per second. Instead of 60 frames per second, he was generating 60 pixels per second.
En lugar de 60
And so the
frames, 60
question then
píxeles.
is, how long would it take for us from that time for us to be able to realize this incredibly beautiful picture that I just showed you a second ago? Well, if you look at our technology curve, has been nothing short of extraordinary. And ladies and gentlemen, you have so much to do with it. Because of the extraordinary demand of video games and the scale and the size and the vastness of this entire industry, it has propelled one of the most fast advancing technology in the history of computer science. If you look at this curve, Moore's law has been the foundational thought, the foundational idea of computer science for 35 years. And yet during this entire time, since our beginning, we have been moving at 10 times Moore's law. If you go back to when Moore's law was following historical levels of increasing performance 10 times every 5 years, 10 times every 5
Incrementa
years, or
el
100
rendimiento
times
10 veces
every 10 years.
cada 5
Our
años.
GPU technology was advancing at 1,000 times every 10 years. 1,000 times every
100 veces
every 10
cada
years.
10 años.
And so the question is, and by the way, these are
Su
some of my
tecnología.
favorite GPUs. Look at GeForce 256, the world's first GeForce. How many of you have
GeForce
GeForce
256 fue la primera y pregunta ¿cuántos de vosotros
Incredible, thank you.
tuvisteis una GeForce 256? Yo no la tuve. Creo.
Look
He
how
levantado
huge
la mano.
GeForce 256 is.
1000
At the
veces,
time,
perdón.
so you know, at the time, it was the single largest chip ever built. It was bigger than a CPU. And people were shocked that we built something that big, and they were even more shocked that we could sell something that big. But anyways, GeForce 256. GeForce 3 was the world's first programmable shader. GeForce GTX 8800 was the first CUDA GPU, the most important GPU we had built up to that time. And then, of course, the most powerful GPU in the world today, the GTX 1080. Well, if you were to plot out this trend and you were to think about how many rays it would take, you had billions of rays we had to send into that room, even though we're not simulating most of the rays, only the ones that are coming into our eyes. We're sending in billions of rays into that room. We've got diffuse rays that we have to do. We have reflection rays, refraction rays, and it's bouncing all over the world, all over the scene. And you have hundreds of polygons, hundreds of millions of polygons. The amount of computation necessary is easily in the several petaflops. Well, several petaflops, we're already at the teraflops
Estoy hablando de
today.
cosas tecnológicas, de
So it would
petaflops y
take
de todo lo que necesitas para mover cada vez más tecnología.
10 more years, approximately 10 more years at our current rate of progress to go from teraflops to petaflops.
Creo que he dicho que necesitas 10
Well, we
años
didn't
para
wanna
pasar de
wait that
teraflops a petaflops. Sí, esto es muy
didn't wanna
complicado,
wait
así
that
que
long.
cualquiera puede comentar en el chat
And
y
as
lo
you
digo.
know, architecture is the single greatest lever in computer graphics. It is the single greatest lever of GPUs. So what are the interesting new ideas we could create that allows us to achieve effectively 1,000 times more performance 10 years earlier? And so we invented the Nvidia RTX.
Han,
The Nvidia
han creado la Nvidia
It's a
RTX
platform consisting of architecture and software and SDKs and libraries
para poder
that
manejar toda
allows
esa
us to
tecnología.
combine different types of rendering technology into one unified and cohesive platform.
Combinan diferentes
Of course, it should
arquitecturas
always
y
take
demás
advantage
y
of rasterization.
programas para poder
Rasterization
manejar
is
toda la
so incredibly
tecnología.
powerful and so incredibly efficient. But we also need to include ray tracing. However, just
incluye
ray
ray
tracing at brute force level simply won't get us there. It simply won't get us there. And in fact, I'll show you something later that's just really amazing. It simply won't get us there unless we use this technology we discovered about 6-7 years ago called deep learning or artificial intelligence. We can finally create images along with ray tracing that allows us to achieve the levels that we otherwise can't imagine. Now, we leverage two fundamental rendering technologies. You know very well rasterization, which is the way that we do things today. We start with the 3D world, and we take the 3D world information, the vertices, the triangles, and we project 3D world vertices into a 2D world pixel into our screen space. That projection leaves the silhouette of a triangle, and we have to decide and test which one of the pixels are within that triangle. One of the most beautiful things about rasterization is that you could parallelize an enormous amount of calculation. And nothing is more beautiful than being able to do things in parallel. That's one of the reasons why the GPU is so incredibly powerful at parallel processing. It started with the idea of doing things in parallel. It also has the ability to do things incredibly high resolution, because high resolution is just more things in parallel. And so rasterization was incredibly powerful. One of its limitations, however, is that every single time you want to light the world, you have to project light from that light. And if you want 2 or 3 lights, that's fine. If you have an area light, that's effectively infinite number of lights.
Si tienes un área de luz, tienes infinitas posibilidades. En un área llena de focos de luz.
Everything in the room became a lighting surface, otherwise known as global illumination. In the world of global illumination, all of a sudden the number of lights that you would have to cast inside that scene is just insane.
Todo lo que tienes que hacer es una brutalidad.
Well, this is where ray tracing is particularly effective.
Ahora, luego seguro que van a poner ejemplos de qué significa el ray tracing, ¿eh? Todo es muy tecnológico, pero seguro que vais a ver ejemplos ahora.
Pixels that comes into your eyes. The number of rays that ultimately reach your eyes. The vast majority of the rays inside this room, the vast majority of rays in the world simply never are reaching our eyes. And so we immediately reject them. We immediately don't have to do them. And we start from ray tracing our eyes. Ray tracing, whereas rasterization is taking 3D world data, projecting it in 2D, ray tracing is sending out a ray of light, intersecting the pixel at the screen space, and enters into the world looking for a triangle that it would intersect. The two basic approaches both has its strengths and weaknesses. In the case of ray tracing, in order to ray trace this entire room, the number of rays, the trillions of rays, the hundreds of millions of polygons, the amount of testing that you have to do just to figure out which ray intersected which polygon is just extraordinary. You simply can't do it. Well, we put this platform together. And we worked with Microsoft to create the DirectX ray tracing, otherwise known as DXR, the Microsoft DXR. And then we worked with Epic to integrate RTX, DXR, into the Unreal Engine, the UE4 engine.
Y han trabajado con Microsoft y con Epic para juntarlo con el Unreal Engine y mejorar toda la tecnología y demás.
And together, we created the world's first real-time ray tracing demonstration. It had never been done before. And we announced it.
Han creado entre los tres la primera demostración de ray tracing en tiempo real.
And I want to show you something special about it in just a second. Okay, so this is our demonstration.
Este es el vídeo que creo que ya habéis visto y la verdad es que es una absoluta pasada. Atención a cómo se ve el ray tracing y que todo esto está generado por ordenador al 100%. Todo esto. Cómo funcionan las luces y demás. Fijaos en los reflejos.
If you ask me, who's ever in charge of this place should be transferred to Hoth. What? What? You think she heard us? Yeah, I think she heard us. At least we blend in for once.
Incredible, right?
Eso
Absolutely
es.
incredible.
Así es como se ve la tecnología y demás. Esto se
And
presentó en el GDC en marzo de
what you saw,
2018.
what you saw was physically based materials. It was sitting in an elevator shaft.
No es,
Qué bonito
cinemática,
se ve, ¿eh?
no es cinemática, esto es
And those
así.
area lights were
Lo que pasa es que
moving
necesitas
as the
una
elevator
buena
was
máquina
moving.
para moverlo.
And therefore, as the area lights would illuminate the surfaces, and the shadows would be soft. The shadows would be soft. Using area lights, incredibly difficult to render shadows. And notice the inner reflection. There's reflection off of Phasma. There's inner reflection of Phasma on her gun. And there's reflection of her gun on her chest.
Está
And if you
explicando
look at
que la armadura
stormtroopers,
de
the
Phasma
illumination
tiene
and reflections are all
cientos de
completely
reflejos
in real
diferentes
time.
que provienen de distintos
Doing this
focos.
is simply impractical today. The way that you would do it, of course, is that you would fake a whole bunch of lights. That would slow down performance. It still won't look right, and all the shadows will look bandy. Second, you would create all kinds of what is called reflection probes made out of cube maps. But unfortunately, they're all moving. So every single scene, you're going to have to create a whole bunch more reflection probes, a whole bunch more cube maps, basically starting from the point where you would like to have to see reflection and rendering out from that point every single direction, turning into a cube reflection map. Those tricks simply are not practical with a scene of this level of fidelity. Well, it took 4 Tesla V100s, the same GPUs that are powering the world, 5 of the world's top 7 supercomputers today. It takes 4 of them in a $68,000 deep learning supercomputer that we make called the DGX. This is what
Casina.
researchers use to create their deep learning AI models. And so $68,000 to finally render running the
¿Ha dicho
RTX
68?
platform, real-time ray tracing at about 20 some odd frames per second.
$68,000 para mover eso.
Well, when we announced it, people got so excited about it. They said, how do we buy that DGX? We could use it as a game console. And the requests just kept coming in. How do we turn DGX into a game console? The price point is slightly out of reach for most gamers. And so today, I would like to make my first announcement.
Primer anuncio.
Starting immediately, DGX.
Está haciendo la... Bueno, a lo mejor no es broma. A lo mejor puedes comprar el ordenador de $60,000 y tal.
3,000 easy payments of $19.95.
O en 3,000 pagos de $20.
We'll throw in the first game for free. So call now. The telephone number is right below you.
Ahora nos va a decir que, por supuesto, no hace falta gastar $60,000, sino que te puedes gastar mucho menos en, supongo yo.
Good luck with that. It's beautiful, isn't it? That's just completely liquid cooled. It is silent, doesn't make a peep, and it does real-time ray tracing for the very first time for $68,000. Well, it turns out what you were looking at just now was not running on that. It was running on this little thing, this little bad guy. This is called Turing. We've been working on Turing now for almost 10 years. Trying, failing,
llevan haciendo desde hace
all these different
más de 10
algorithms,
años.
trying, failing, and finally, Turing. The most
Tecnología
advanced
Turing.
GPU we've ever done, 10 years in the making, the greatest leap since we created CUDA, and computer graphics will never be the same again. Inside Turing is 18.9 billion transistors. This GPU, this chip, is the second largest chip the world has ever made. The only other largest chip is called the V100, which powers supercomputers all over the world. It has 3 brand new processors. The SM is completely brand new, has the ability to do independent floating point and integer operations. And the reason for that is sometimes you're shading for color, sometimes you're using integer operations to calculate addresses so that you could run your shader program to do things like subsurface scattering. And as more and more special effects are to happen, the SM's address calculation part of the logic becomes much more complex. 14 teraflops and 14 integer operations per second.
Estáis viendo un poquito toda la tecnología que tiene desarrollándola desde hace más de 10 años con ensayo y
It also has the
error.
ability to do this thing I won't talk much about today, but we're going to write plenty about it, variable rate shading, so that we could do things like foveated rendering, focusing all of the horsepower to GPU where your eyes are focused instead of wasting it evenly across the entire space. If you're moving, we might be able to adapt the place where we focus your shading horsepower. If the resolution or the content detail is different across the entire scene, as most scenes are, we could focus.
Comenta que en una
our
escena te
horsepower
puedes centrar
where
en
there's
un punto
greatest amount of
y
fidelity.
verla
As a
mejor y
result,
demás.
you're effectively getting a several X boost in your shading performance. The second is a processor we call the RT core. RT stands for ray tracing core. It's 10 gigaраys per second. I love saying that, 10 gigaраys per second. A 1080 Ti, the
10
fastest
gigaраys.
GPU in the world today,
Sea lo que sea.
1080 Ti does 1.21 you guys got, no? Nobody ever saw that show? 1.21 gigaраys per second.
¿Has dicho que la 1080 tiene 1,12?
So we do 10
¿Uno con algo?
gigaраys per second, which is 10 times a 1080 Ti. It does I'll explain that in just a second, a BVH tree traversal, and it does ray triangle intersection testing. And then we have a new processor called Tensor Core, which runs AI processing like crazy. 110 floating point teraflops, or because it has multiple precisions, depending on the type of networks you're running, you might be able to use lower precision or mixed precision. As a result, 440 tops with 4-bit integer. All of this so that we could do hybrid rendering and run RTX. Well, so the question is,
La pregunta es,
how does this all turn out? So if you look at the
¿cómo vamos a
performance,
hacer esto? Venga.
it looks kind of like this.
Vamos a ver la
Turing is built
performance,
for
cómo funciona.
RTX. And if we ran, the first thing I showed you was originally ran a GDC was DGX with 4 voltas.
4 voltas.
55 milliseconds. 55 milliseconds, about 20 frames per second. And this is what Turing looks like.
Vamos a ver Turing, la diferencia.
1
45.
So 4 voltas in a DGX.
Las 4 chismas que están ahí conectadas del aparato de $60,000 tiene una respuesta de 55 y Turing tiene 45.
This has simply never happened before. Doing computer graphics, essentially a supercomputer replaced by 1 GPU within 1 generation. Of course, it took us 10 years working in parallel. If you were to look at Pascal, this is what Pascal looks like.
Vamos a ver Pascal. Pascal tiene una respuesta de 308.
The fastest GPU on the planet. The fastest GPU on the planet today. 1080 Ti, 308 milliseconds.
La 1080 Ti tiene ese rendimiento y la Turing tiene ese rendimiento. Tiene 45.
So
es una gran
the question is,
diferencia.
what's happening under the hood? This is a new computing model, and so there's a new way to think about performance. It's a new computing model, so there needs to be new metrics. Back in the good old days, the vast majority of computation was done in shading. We're basically shading the color, or we're running a program in the shader, and basically we're shading. But in the future, we're going to be doing lighting, we're going to be doing all kinds of image processing, and so the pipeline is completely different. And if a pipeline is different, the platform software has got to be different, the architecture of the GPU has to be different, and you have to measure it differently. We have a new way of measuring. And let me talk to you about how we're going to do that. So if you look at this frame, this is abstracted, of course, but it's not too far off. Basically, within the frame that I was showing you earlier, we're doing ray tracing pretty much all the time. Okay, we're shooting rays all over the place. We're looking for intersections of triangles and figuring out which one of them has to generate shadow rays and which ones of them have to generate reflection rays and which one of them has to generate refraction rays. And for the reflected rays, it's got to figure out how many more shadow rays it's got to generate. And so all those rays are being bouncing all over the place, and eventually we accumulate the color, the intensity, whether it's directly or from something nearby, and we shade that surface. And so we're ray tracing all the time. And that's with our RT core. That's the amount of time, the fraction of time within 22 milliseconds that an RT core is doing it. Imagine if we didn't have the RT core, multiply that by 10. If we didn't have an RT core, that green bar, just simply in terms of time, is just 10 times larger. So basically, all the way down the street. Shading is shading. We're doing shading incredibly well. One of the things that's really great about Turing shader is that we can now overlap or run independently floating point integer, and as a result, it's, call it 1.5 times more performant than it used to be.
Para traducirlo
that's
es
the integer shading there.
muy complejo y traducido a lo mejor tampoco lo entenderíais, pero hablo un poquito de cómo cambia la forma de trabajar y de hacer los gráficos y todo eso. Cómo generar los distintos píxeles.
To generate using artificial intelligence the pixel that we haven't finished, or use artificial intelligence to generate resolution that we otherwise couldn't have. Okay? It is possible to filter information, but it's very, very difficult to generate new information that looks right. And so with artificial intelligence, we can now, for the very first time, generate missing pixels that are actually right. And we could do it in real time because we have the tensor core. And so if this is what's going on in the frame, then what's happening inside our chip? So the first part,
¿Qué pasa con el
the
chip?
first part of that
Están enseñando las distintas partes de esta tecnología Turing y demás. Todo lo que tiene
the
dentro.
Turing SM and the RT core are both concurrently running. Later on, we're shading and running other parts of the program, the shader program. And so those two parts are running, the FP and the integer. And then finally, when everything is done, we're going to use artificial intelligence. All of our 110 teraflops, 110 teraflops, think of that, is basically 10 1080 Ti's. It's basically 10 1080 Ti's dedicated to doing one thing, which is artificial intelligence.
Dice de 10 1080 Ti, lo tenemos ahí, en esa tecnología que tenemos son 10 1080 Ti.
Of shader math, you have 110 teraflops effectively of ray tracing, 14 plus 14 independent teraflops and tips, and then lastly 110 FP16 tensor core processing floating point operations per second. When you take that and do the weighted average on it, it's basically 78 tera RTX ops per second. And so the way to think about performance in the future is to figure out a way to weight all of these different types of processors. And so the way we think about Turing is 78 tera RTX ops. Okay? Compare that to a Titan X, our highest end of approximately 12. 78 versus 12. When you're running ray tracing, that's what it's going to look like, 78 versus 12. Well, one of the most important miracles, you're going to see a lot of writing about this in the future, is simply the testing. The concept is simple. You're sending an array into the scene, and you're trying to figure out which one of those triangles out of 100 million that intersects.
Y ves
well,
toda la
you
escena.
could simply
A ver cómo afecta.
just walk across the screen and see which one you eventually touch. Well, you got to go 100 million times. Or what you could do is you create a data structure, an acceleration data structure called a bounding volume hierarchy. Basically, it's like binning. Suppose I had 10 things I got to figure out which one is the one I want. I was asked to go pick something out. I had to go pick one of 10. Excuse me, one of 1,000. I'm going to put 10 bins or 10 boxes. And within each one of them, I'll have 100 things. Within each box, I'll have 10 boxes with 10 things each. If I knew that, as I started looking for that thing out of those boxes, and I discovered that it is in one of those larger boxes, then I can ignore every other box. And then once I find it within the larger boxes, if I find it within one of the 10 smaller boxes, I can ignore all of the other boxes. And then if I can find
Puedes
it within
crear
that
distintas
box, I
posibilidades
know it's one of the 10.
y luego te quedas sencillamente
It's the
con
same
la que tú
idea
hayas
here.
elegido,
We're sending
ignorando
this
todas las
triangle,
demás,
we're sending out
sin
this
que
ray
sea
to
una
try to figure out
tarea
which one of the triangles it
extremadamente
intersects with.
complicada.
And once it
Así, muy en
intersects with a
resumen.
bounding box, which is a large structure, which has a whole bunch of other bounding boxes within it, which other boxes within it, and within that there's a whole bunch of triangles. Once we intersect one of the bounding boxes, we know all the other bounding boxes are ignored. And then we figure out which one of the bounding boxes within, and then once we figure out which one of the bounding boxes within, we have to figure out which one of the triangles it happens to be.
Y dentro de
the
todo lo que
amount
hemos
of
elegido,
mathematics
seguimos
necessary to do this
profundizando
is
dentro
just
de
shocking.
todo el luz
And
que
to do
da
it
en esa
precisely,
caja, en esa escena que
so
hemos
that the
elegido.
image quality is perfect is really, really hard, and took us 10 years to do this. To create the architecture and the algorithm for doing this, design it in a way that actually speeds up, which is very, very hard to do because these beams, all these rays are incoherent, which is the enemy of parallelism. Somehow, we figured out a way to make all these incoherent things largely parallel, and then to create an acceleration structure, an accelerator that allows us to do this at the speed of light. And so, the RT core was invented. Well, the RT core invention had to go along with all the software layer on top of it and what we call eventually the RTX platform. At SIGGRAPH, we were really pleased to see research being done in this area. Our researchers and the researchers at the Search for Extraordinary Experience, I love that, SEED, Electronic Arts Research Team. Nvidia Research is called Nvidia Research.
Estáis viendo distintas escenas con distintas
EA Research
tecnologías y
is
demás.
called Seed.
Recordemos
I
que
love
tiene como
that.
5 tecnologías, si no me falla la memoria, y que ahí está utilizando las distintas dentro de la misma, del mismo Turing.
RTX with our researchers to figure out how it could accelerate.
Los colores significan lo que estás utilizando.
And everything from deferred shading and direct shadows and lighting and reflections and global illumination and ambient occlusion, transparency and translucency. Translucency and transparency are just incredibly hard to do with rasterization because the concept of depth is very difficult to discern. And post-processing, as you could see, for each one of these operations, we're using different parts of the chip, exactly as I described earlier. The effective ops, the effective computational capability, 6 times Volta. 6 times Volta, 6 times NVIDIA V100. And so that kind of puts it in perspective.
Muy bien.
This new Turing processor, this new Turing GPU is just a monster. It's incredible. Let's take a look at some of this stuff. And so this is what it looks like. This is computer graphics today. Physically based material, direct lighting.
Esta sí es como funciona sin el RTX, la tecnología ahora, ¿vale? Y ahora vamos a ver cómo funciona con el RTX.
RTX looks like. Okay, so.
Ahí tenemos los reflejos de luz y los distintos efectos de luz, cómo funciona. Y estaba Alex el capo.
Hey, you got to clap at the old stuff too because, you know, it resembles us. So, here we go. I'll give you a chance. Guys.
Así es como se ve la tecnología ahora.
This is where we came from. You got to be proud of it. You got to own it. It's ugly, but you got to own it. Before, after.
Y ahí es cómo funciona con el Ray Tracing. Los distintos focos de luz y cómo a partir de ahí es cómo vas trabajando.
Oh no, this is just the beginning. I'm just warming you guys up.
Solo es el comienzo, tranquilos.
I just gave you an olive for the appetizer.
Solo nos ha dado una oliva para abrirnos el apetito.
Nacho,
hi.
Is it you and me?
Yes.
Okay, so
Nacho,
this is Nacho. He's one of our dev techs. Incredible computer scientist, amazing computer graphics engineer.
Es con el RTX off. Ahora vamos a ver cómo afecta la escena con el
RTX off. Now, of course, this scene is incredibly hard, and the reason for that is because you can't use tricks like screen space reflection here. You could put some reflection probes, but it's just incredibly hard here because things are being reflected all over the place. There's refraction.
Nacho de Albacete. Dale
You see that graphics card back there? That's
Dale
a
alon,
beautiful
Nacho.
graphics card that announced it a week ago. That's called the Quadro RTX. And you got this crystal ball here where it should
Nacho, haz tu
and
magia.
refract.
Haz tu magia,
There's a
Nacho.
little green ball on the ground there, and then there's that chrome ball in the back, and this empty, I don't know why, but empty glass box. And it's got area light coming in, which is really hard to do. Okay? And so in this particular case, Ignacio is doing his best to emulate the area lights, but the shadows are ugly. This is the limits of today's computer graphics. Now, we could fake a lot of stuff. We could fake a lot of stuff by arting it up and cause you to not look at it. But in the final
Nvidia,
analysis,
Nacho,
this is what the limits of today's computer graphics.
Oye, pero Nacho le va a dar al botón o no le va a dar al botón, que yo estoy aquí expectante.
Ahí está.
Ahí.
Venga, Nacho, hijo.
Muy bien, muy bonito.
¡Ole, Nacho! ¡Ole tú!
Vamos, Nacho. Vamos, Nacho.
So let's take a look at RTX on. Look what happens. The refraction of the glass globe there is just incredible. And look at this, the little caustics on the ground.
Comenta cómo el reflejo de los
area
distintos
lights,
elementos de cristal y demás, que es
cast a soft
bastante
shadow.
espectacular.
The umbra and the penumbra, notice of the graphics card. The shadow of the chrome ball looks right. Now there's reflection of the
Por cierto, la
glass
página de Nvidia está
box
caída porque todo el
in
mundo
the
está intentando
RTX,
entrar.
Quadro RTX. You see Quadro RTX from that sphere, and you see the reflection of the chrome ball with a little bit of rough surface to give you a sense of material. Everything just kind of looks right. Even the glass is casting a shadow. Hey, let's go back to the last one again.
Vamos afuera a quitar el RTX.
Yeah, I know.
Y ahora lo va a volver a poner, supongo.
Now, of course, we got to add a whole bunch of paint and a whole bunch of stuff to make it look right. Or we could do it this way. RTX on.
Ya tenemos
Los
RTX.
AIR no tenemos nada que ver con ello.
Nacho.
Ese es Alex el Capo.
And there was a gasp in the audience. But this could possibly be a photograph, right? Nacho, show me what you got. Oh,
Hola.
Come on.
Hola.
Okay. Pretty incredible. You had to turn on a spotlight on top of that.
Enséñame lo que tienes, Nacho. Enséñame lo que
Everything
tienes.
just works. Everything just works. Look, glass reflects and
La luz
refracts.
tiene como una luz propia o
and
algo de eso.
magnifies
Mira
just
cómo
like it's supposed
va
to.
reflejando
El reflejo.
del reflejo de la luz y cómo
The benefit of
funciona, cómo
RTX,
ilumina el
just
área.
turn it on.
Depende
you.
de cómo
Good job.
golpee. Depende de cómo golpee. Mira, Alex el Capo.
And so now I'm going to show you something.
¿Lo
We're
ves o
going
no?
to turn it all together. We're going to put it all in. We're going to put it all together.
Vamos a
And it's
enseñar
going to
algo
be
para
a
ponerlo todo
demonstration
junto.
that we
Una
created
demostración
recently.
que hemos
We
creado
created recently
recientemente
to highlight the power of Nvidia
para
RTX,
destacar
this
el
mixed
poder
mode rendering,
del RTX.
unifying rasterization, ray tracing, compute, and artificial intelligence. And what you're about to see is completely in real time. Everything you're about to see is completely in real time. It's kind of hard to grok because it's going to be so beautiful, but it's completely in real time. You're going to see beautiful reflections. You're going to see inter-reflections, reflections of reflections.
Mira, Juste, mira una cosita vía
You're going to
WhatsApp.
see beautiful lighting. You're going to see area lights.
No puedo mirarlo.
You're going to see
Bueno,
beautiful
pero sí.
ambient occlusion. You're going to see beautiful physically modeled materials. So things that look like metal looks like metal. Things that look like things look like things. That's very technical. And that's how I talk to the engineers. Guys, we got to make things that are things look like things. And they go, I know what you want, boss. And so what's in here is just really a miracle. And it's running on one Turing GPU. It's running on one Turing GPU.
Solo
Ladies
una
and
GPU
gentlemen,
Turing.
The name of our
Atención, el nombre.
is called Sol. S-O-L.
Sol, S-O-L. A ver estos highlights. Silencio.
Guardianes de la Galaxia Moment.
The cake is a lie.
What do you guys think?
Estoy viendo, ¿no? La importancia que también se le ha dado a este vídeo, a todos los reflejos de luz que tienen y demás.
Nvidia RTX running on top of a Turing GPU. Hybrid rendering, real-time ray tracing for the very first time. That's the first part.
La primera parte.
Deep learning is the single most powerful computer technology that has come onto the scene in the last 30 years.
Ahora está hablando de deep
learning, where using a large amount of data, you could train a supremely large neural network how to do things. You train these neural networks with all of this massive amounts of data, which is otherwise examples, on supercomputers. And this is the reason why voice recognition, natural language understanding, photo tagging, image recognition, all of these amazing feats of software are now finally possible.
Del deep learning tecnológicamente para que se utiliza donde se utiliza y demás.
Within reason to fathom. Deep learning is changing one industry after another. And people consider this the fourth industrial revolution. It is going to enable
Deep learning es considerada la cuarta revolución industrial.
To write software by itself.
Para que el software corra por sí mismo. Para los superordenadores.
At Nvidia we're doing all kinds of research around deep learning.
Y que están haciendo mucha investigación desde Nvidia con el deep learning.
Supercomputer that all of our researchers use to develop software. Now some of the things that are I'm showing you some examples here. These are some of my favorites, but there's so many. For example, you could teach a neural network how to colorize by just showing this neural network examples of this is a black and white, this is how you colorize it, this is black and white, this is how you colorize it. It eventually learns what the pattern is, and you can give it a black and white image, and it colorizes it. You could teach a network how to take a low resolution image and make it higher resolution. Because you and I
coger una imagen en blanco y negro y ponerla en color, una imagen en baja resolución y darle buena resolución.
And so you could use a low resolution image input and eventually get an output of a high resolution image by going the other way, which is starting with a high resolution image and give this neural network the opportunity to generate that, and whenever it's wrong, whenever it's wrong, you correct it using this thing called stochastic gradient descent and back propagation. And so you literally correct it, and it tries to guess and guess and guess, and it corrects itself until one day it's able to figure out what pixels to generate. You could teach it how to take a cartoon and turn it into live video. This is a piece of work that we did in Nvidia research. Okay, we simply taught it.
Segmentación Lemao. What the fuck?
Pretty amazing, right? We could teach it to take a low-resolution CT scan and not only increase the resolution of it, but also segment it, figure out what organ is what from that blurry blue image. Okay, you watch this? We taught it how to segment, how to identify which organ is what, and put a different color around it. Pretty amazing. This is going to revolutionize medical imaging. We have a platform called Clara. It has the ability
También está hablando del uso del deep learning para
find identical twins.
lo que viene a ser la medical, cosas médicas.
Come on, you guys, that was fun.
Eso sí que es una maravilla, tú.
I don't. This is what we taught it to do. Change the color of the hair. All in real time. Previously, you would have to find identical twins to do that. Much harder. Now you could do it with an artificial intelligence network. You could take a sketch and turn it into 3D.
Gracias al deep learning. Un poquito de risa, pero...
So you take this neural network, you give it a whole bunch of examples, you tell it what is the input and what is the exact expected output, and we give it a chance to try again, trillions and trillions of times on a supercomputer. Eventually, it trains and does this amazing thing. And then it creates this neural network model with hundreds of millions of parameters or hundreds of gigaflops of operation necessary to perform its task, to either classify, to predict, to draw, to generate, to imagine what color looks like. We could teach it to do these amazing things. However, there are so many architectures.
Con toda la tecnología y demás en la arquitectura, pues puede trabajar y procesar toda esta información para crear estas tareas que estábamos viendo, y estamos viendo el núcleo con las distintas cositas que tiene. Imagina que 1080 Ti,
11 teraflops.
11 teraflops.
A full 1080 Ti at $699 is 11 teraflops. This is 110 teraflops. Basically, it would take 10 full 1080 Ti's to keep up with the tensor core processor that's all over the Turing GPU. Now, one of the things that we taught it to do is something really
10 veces más, ¿no? Si no fuera la memoria.
And so we taught the neural network this thing, and we're calling it the Nvidia DLSS, Deep Learning Super Sample. Basically works like this. We create a whole bunch of super, super high resolution images with lots and lots of samples. So we jitter it and we create basically 64 amazing images, and we create hundreds of thousands of those. And then we give our network, we put an image in here, and we say, using this, it's called an autoencoder, convolutional autoencoder. It has to be temporally stable because we want to do this for live action. And so the network has to remember part of the past. And we're going to give it an image, and we're saying, go generate this amazing image on the output. Okay? So pretty soon we'll be able to give it a new image it's never seen. We train it, and every time we train it, if it guesses wrong, we tell it what's the right answer, we propagate it back. It takes another image, it guesses it again, and if it turns out to be wrong, we propagate it back. And we sit there and we just simply loop on it on a supercomputer. We run it trillions of times. And then eventually you put in an image and it creates this beautiful image out.
Puedes generar distintas imágenes de alta resolución con la tecnología, con el Temporally Stable Conventional Autoencoder, y de ahí pasarlo a esas cientos de imágenes juntas que dan algo nuevo y diferente.
Where did that come from? Where did that magic come from? It came from partly a supercomputer. Essentially, what deep learning is doing is codifying the memories of a supercomputer, and it puts it into this neural network, basically an image generation brain. And you put this image generation brain, this neural brain, into the mathematics of our GPU. All of a sudden, it knows when it sees this image, a better version of it is that. And it sees a new image, a better version of it is that. That mathematics came about, the weights of those neurons came about because of a supercomputer. And so in the future, every game would have had the benefit of supercomputer pre-processing before you play it. And we call that platform the Nvidia NGX. In the future, computer graphics will merge with neural net processing.
En el futuro, los gráficos de ordenadores se funcionarán con el neuro, lo que estamos viendo ahora, el Neural Graphic Frameworks.
Doing all kinds of amazing image processing. You saw earlier
cómo se generarán,
super resolution, we've invented super slow-mo. We're going to do all kinds of amazing things that makes video games and the images that come out of these computer graphics, CGI, look even more amazing. Basically, it works like this. We have a supercomputing infrastructure. There's a whole bunch of software that runs on it. The first thing you do is you generate ground truth. What is the perfect image? What is the perfect image? And then we have to train this model. It's a multi-dimensional manifold, and we're basically randomly walking around this manifold looking for the least error, looking for the time when you send in an image, the output is closest.
Esto lo que hace es que la imagen se pueda ver de la mejor forma posible gracias a la tecnología.
That your prediction is the closest to ground truth. And you're sitting here wandering around this gigantic universe, and it's incredibly, incredibly large. And so the computation time is very, very long. And that's why we build these supercomputers we call DGX. I showed you an earlier version, the desk side version with 4 GPUs. These ones have 8. And then we test and optimize it. Then you put in a low-resolution image or lower quality image, or the image is, in fact, not even complete with ray tracing, and somehow we complete it. Somehow we make it more beautiful, the NVIDIA NGX. And then we have this AI model that we then OTA to you. You download it into your driver, into this plug-in interface called NGX, and the neural networks are changing all the time. They're getting better and better, and we put it up in the cloud.
Toda esa tecnología se va al NGX y va dando vueltas, generando distintas cosas, y al final pues te da algo lo más óptimo que interpreta la máquina. Es una plataforma de RTX, de Turing.
Well, the supercomputer looks like this. This is the machine that is generating all of those networks. And basically,
la más larga GPU jamás creada.
Before you even run your game on Turing, there are a bunch of supercomputers.
¿Cómo la más larga?
Here's one.
Eso pone larga, bueno,
There's
grande.
A bunch of supercomputers
la más grande, ¿no?
That's training these models. And this,
y ya son bicharracos.
And the graphics card, here's one. The graphics card, you guys know what a graphics card looks like, right? Here's one.
Eso es una tarjeta
Available
gráfica.
Retail.
¿Eso es una tarjeta gráfica?
$68,000.
LOL.
Hostia, ¿dónde vas con esto tú?
Okay.
¿Quieres
Pues
una?
eso no cabe en mi ordenador.
Que ponga más uno el que quiera una así. Que ponga más uno el que quiera una así.
Y esa que la metes en el horno de bandeja, porque es que mi ordenador no cabe.
Interconnects called NVLink connects all of these GPUs together into one virtual GPU. Every single GPU can see each other's GPU memory. all together, this board, that system has 2 of these inside. 2 of them.
Ese ordenador tiene 2 como eso ahí.
That's another petaflop, not motherboard, but mother of, God, it's heavy. GPU.
Dice que pesa mucho.
2 graphics cards makes 2 petaflops.
Escucha, pese lo que pese, para llevar la chupa que lleva de tipo duro, poco le tiene que parecer.
Is basically a
Los detallitos de las zapatillitas en verde
to that side.
son nice,
400 servers, $2 million without anything else of servers this replaces. And so we use this to train the neural network model. Here we go. Here. You could do it. Thanks, lad. Thanks, Paul. You use that, and you train this network called the Nvidia
GPUs
DLSS.
conectadas por NVLink, comentan por aquí.
And then it comes up with a model like this, and this is 4K TAA. You guys know the Unreal Engine Epic's demo called Infiltrator. It's just beautiful.
4K TAA y 4K
incredibly
DLSS.
Taxing on systems, and 4K TAA up there. TAA is the anti-aliasing technology we invented, which is temporal. And so temporal, it takes last frame, the motion vectors, and it tries to figure out what's the best combination to create beautiful edges. Look at that, because it's temporal and the motion vectors, so many things are moving. You see a disjointed hinge over here. And this is 4K DLSS. Look at this. That's just perfect.
Please.
Okay. Well, for the very first time, because of this, because we could take a lower resolution image,
porque podemos tener una
imagen
de pequeña resolución y tenemos la neural
with
network
all kinds of super high resolution and super high quality images. This neural network, it runs on a bat out of hell processor called a tensor core, could then in real time enhance images. In real time generate pixels it had never seen before. Generate pixels that make sense to go there, because if you and I were to look at it, we would know what makes sense to go there, and therefore it makes sense that we could teach a neural network how to make sense of what pixels to put there.
A ver, ¿qué tal? Venga.
I'm going to show you something. This is Infiltrator running on one GPU
funcionando una
at
GPU
78 frames per second in 4K.
Venga.
At a quality that has never been seen before. A 1080 Ti, the fastest GPU in the world, can currently do about 30-something. Okay? From 30-something, what you're about to see is 4K. Now I'm going to lock it to 60 hertz because this display happens to be V-synced. And so you're going to see the frame rate on top, and ideally, it's pretty high.
Venga.
Very first time to see Infiltrator running at 60 hertz.
Venga, vamos a ver cómo funciona.
In 4K.
Estáis viendo ahí 60 FPS, la gente corriendo y tal.